Oh boy, good Monday morning, everyone. Welcome into Morning Invest. I'm Clayton Morris. So glad to have you here on this Monday. I hope you guys are well rested after a crazy Super Bowl last night. Wow, 7 Super Bowl victories for Tom Brady. My Kansas City Chiefs friends are not happy this morning. But it was a crazy, crazy Super Bowl last night. I can't even believe that the Chiefs couldn't even manage to get in the end zone to score a touchdown. I said if they actually won, the place kicker Suckup should have gotten the MVP because of how many field goals he kicked. Anyway, nevertheless, let's talk about stimulus this morning and a couple of really 3 big different stories that are unfolding today on the show. So we're going to get to all of those big stories. Number one is the fact that bipartisanship is basically out the window. Democrats are moving forward full steam without Republican support. That's one big piece of this story. Another is on student loan forgiveness, gaining steam. A number of other members of Congress are coming forward supporting a $50,000 reduction or elimination of student loan debt. We're going to hear from Representative Ilhan Omar on that point, and that is gaining traction over the weekend. So a lot of moving things that happened over the weekend in Congress. And most importantly, though, is the ground that's being gained today on the move towards $2,000 stimulus, recurring stimulus checks. Now, first, I want to tell you, please, because we've got our petition that's been really doing bonkers right now. We have an outreach to Representative Ilhan Omar's office, as well as other members of Congress who are supporting this. So go over to our petition. Just go to morninginvest.com/sign. We're up to 24,184 right now of people who've signed it. 24,000 people have signed this petition to bring $2,000 a month in recurring stimulus payments to the United States of America, to the citizens of the United States, to help them stay out of poverty and, really just get on par with what the rest of the world is doing. So we're going to hear from Representative Tim Ryan and a number of others today because I'm cautiously optimistic. I am cautiously optimistic this morning that we could actually have members of Congress, over 60 of them now, have signed on to support $2,000 stimulus checks. We'll get to that in just a moment. And I just want you to drop me a comment below. How transformative would it be for you and your family to have $2,000 a month in recurring stimulus until this pandemic is over? Per month. I'm talking through the end of 2021. It would be transformative. I can only imagine. I would love to hear your stories on this. Please drop me a comment below. I read them all. All right, let's dive into the sort of umbrella big news this morning. And that is the move towards going this alone on the Democratic front. So over the weekend, if you were getting together and getting ready for Super Bowl coverage, there's a lot going on in the stimulus world, as Jeff Stein reports. But if you're just tuning in, arguably the biggest takeaway today is President Biden being clearer than ever in condemning the GOP approach and signaling that he will pass a relief bill with Democratic votes alone. Bipartisan talks look dead. Dead, dead, dead. So what is Jeff Stein talking about? Well, over the weekend, it was interesting to hear President Biden really kind of come out with more teeth on all of this, saying that he couldn't understand how out of touch Republicans were. And he really sharpened his attacks against Republicans. It's like gloves are off now. He is not going to sit back and watch Republicans try to dwindle down pieces of his stimulus package. So right now, he's sticking to his $1.9 trillion stimulus package. He says the size of this must remain the same. Republicans, of course, put up their $618 billion stimulus package about a week ago. Was laughable. Didn't even have money for rental assistance. It had a reduction in the amount of checks that would go out to the American people, $1,000. The president saying, you know what? We don't need you after all. We gave you an opportunity to come to the table, and we are going to take this ourselves. We do not need your support. Republicans over the weekend came out and were a little fiery, calling on President Biden, saying, you know what? I thought you were going to be the bipartisanship president. But to me, bipartisanship means coming to the table in a negotiation that's at least close. So if think about this in terms of real estate, right? So let's say you're selling a house, you want you want to sell it for $200,000. The other party says, okay, we'll make you an offer at $175,000. And you're going to probably meet somewhere in the middle, right? 180 something, 187, 185,000, and then you get the deal done. Republicans didn't even come to the table with anything nearing what the president had been offering. Rental assistance, money for state and local governments, money for schools, money to help frontline workers, money for the post office, which has been in a crisis, and stories over the weekend about this massive crisis the post office is facing. It's worse than we thought to get mail out to people. Now we are relying on the mail system more than ever, and it's in total disarray. Money for vaccine distribution, testing, tracing, etc. And stimulus checks, at least $1,400, maybe $2,000. We'll get there in a second. But Republicans didn't even come to the table with a reasonable negotiation on this. They came with $1,000 stimulus checks. No money for rental assistance. I mean, the list of things that was laughable in their $618 billion stimulus bill was endless. So that's not how you start a negotiation. Nevertheless, President Biden saying, we're done, we're moving on, and we are going to go on this by ourselves. Janet Yellen also was interviewed this weekend. Of course, she's the Treasury Secretary. She has been out in front on this. President Biden putting her out, different shows, making sure that she's doing interviews on this. She talks about the necessity to go big or go home on stimulus. Now, what's important about all of this is that a number of members of the Federal Reserve have been more vocal lately. We're going to get to Neil Kashkari, Federal Reserve out of Minnesota, and what he's calling for on the stimulus front. But remember, Janet Yellen has the ear of Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve Chair. Those two are friends. She used to be the Federal Reserve Chair. She wants to go big on stimulus. Here is Janet Yellen on State of the Union with Jake Tapper talking about the necessity to go big and some of the different pieces of this stimulus package. Take a listen.
President Biden and Democrats are pushing forward with this $1.9 trillion relief package. But as you know, one of your predecessors from the Clinton and Obama administration, Larry Summers, suggested that it's just too big. It would flood the economy with too much money, and that could lead to rising inflation. Quote, whereas the Obama stimulus was about half as large as the output shortfall, the proposed Biden stimulus is 3 times as large as the projected shortfall. Why is Summers wrong? Why are you confident this will not cause rising inflation?
Well, first, Jake, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you. I think the risks here, as Treasury Secretary, I have to worry about all of the risks to the economy. And the most important risk is that we leave workers and communities scarred by the pandemic and the economic toll that it's taken, that we don't do enough to address the pandemic and the public health issues, that we don't get our kids back to school. We have 10 million Americans who are unemployed, another 4 million who have dropped out of the labor force, particularly women who have childcare responsibilities. We need to reopen our schools, make sure that children aren't falling behind, provide help. We already have way too many small businesses that are closing. We need to provide help to get them to the other side. And we've already seen 1.3 million state and local government workers, first responders, policemen, firemen, who have lost their jobs. And we need to get them back on the payroll. People are on the verge of losing the roofs over their heads. The package provides rental assistance. We have 24 million adults and 12 million children that are going hungry every day, and we need to provide them with food. We have people suffering, particularly low-wage workers and minorities, and through absolutely no fault of their own, we have to get them to the other side and make sure this doesn't take a permanent toll on their lives. So we need a package that's big enough to address this full range of needs. And I believe that the American Rescue Plan is up to the job.
I got to say, it's refreshing to hear, members of the of the Biden administration basically standing up to former members of the Obama administration. Larry Summers. We talked about this on Friday's show. Of course, Larry Summers came out and talked about, this idea of the risk is going too big. We can't go too big on this. We shouldn't go too big on this. And remember, if you watch my show for any length of time, I back in December when I featured that soundbite of Larry Summers, I said, are you kidding me? Like, this is the neoliberal tactic here, which is to say that, no, we need to make sure just businesses are taken care of, but the American people, screw them. We need to go smaller on this stimulus package. That was Larry Summers, former Obama official, economic official with the Obama administration. So the fear was, oh my God, Biden, he's getting advice from this guy. And here's Janet Yellen throwing him under the bus. Good. This is encouraging. So again, I am like my coffee this morning. I am optimistic. I am, I've got a glass half full. I'm an optimistic person. When you hear Janet Yellen going after Larry Summers and saying, no, we've got to go big. All of these people are suffering. Rental assistance. People are losing their homes. Like, what are you talking about to go small right now? Go Janet Yellen. And finally, someone talking about women's issues. Women have been adversely affected during this pandemic. Many of them have been forced to give up their jobs in order to stay home and provide childcare because the childcare has dried up or the kids are doing virtual schooling and the husband in the family has gone off and continued to work while the wife was just expected to stay home. Her job gone. If she worked 20 hours a week, those hours are gone and now the family is suffering. So good on you, Janet Yellen. Good on you.
My predecessor has indicated that there's a chance that this will cause inflation to rise. And that's also a risk that we have to consider. I've spent many years studying inflation and worrying about inflation, and I can tell you we have the tools to deal with that risk if it materializes. But we face a huge economic challenge here and tremendous suffering in the country. We've got to address that. That's the biggest risk.
And as you noted, the unemployment rate is falling, and that does not take into account the millions of Americans who have left the labor force completely during the pandemic. I think 400,000 or so in the latest jobs report just gave up looking. After the Great Recession, it took almost 7 years to get employment numbers back to where they were. How long do you think it will take now to fully recover all the jobs we lost during this pandemic, including all the people who are jobless and have given up?
So that's a great question. Now, I want to give you the Trump answer to that. Well, Jake, this is the Trump administration's answer. Look, our economy's roaring. Larry Kudlow and others. Our economy's roaring. Have you seen Wall Street? We're doing great. We've had Wall Street's just off the charts. Businesses are looking right now. They're hiring. So we've got green shoots popping up all over the place. Everything is dandy. What is the Biden response? Are they going to lie to the American people like the Trump administration did, or will they actually give it to us straight?
Well, the Congressional Budget Office issued an analysis recently, and it showed that if we don't provide additional support, the unemployment rate is going to stay elevated for years to come.
Oh, an honest answer. Yeah, the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, is a nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. Wow, you're actually citing those numbers. Okay. And by the way, I have not watched this interview yet. So I'm not leading the witness here. I literally am watching it along with you to see what she was going to say on this issue.
It would take till 2025 in order to get the unemployment rate down to 4% again. We would have a long, slow recovery like we had after the financial crisis. But this package is going to really speed recovery, and analysis by Moody's and economists at the Brookings Institution show that very clearly, that we will get people back to work much sooner with this package, and that's really critically important. There's absolutely no reason why we should suffer through a long, slow recovery.
Do you have a timeline though for full reemployment?
Well, I would expect that if this package is passed, that we would get back to full employment next year.
Wow, wow, wow. A wow, wow, weewa. Okay, so getting this package back passed, that's a tall order. We're going to hold them to it. Getting this package passed, $1.9 trillion Biden package, could get us back to full unemployment, back to where we were, which was about 4.3% unemployment by next year. Of course, the great unknown in all of this, remember, is the fact that Americans, millions of them, have just given up looking. So that unemployment number does not necessarily reflect the true unemployment in the United States. I mean, upwards of 10, people say, over 20 million people who have just given up looking. And so they're not included in those numbers. That's an important distinction. Can we get to a point where those people are taken care of, where we help those people? And let's stop being selfish and greedy in all of this. We've got to help these people. If you're worried about, there's people living on welfare, they're taken from the system. We are only as good in the United States as our weakest link. The people at the bottom, the people that are suffering. If we can go around and live our days and go off to fancy restaurants and drive fancy cars, and there are people sleeping on the streets, we are not a strong nation. I was encouraged. Did you watch the Super Bowl yesterday? I tweeted about this yesterday, but I was, how I always talk about Norway here on the show. If you've watched and you subscribe to my channel for any length of time, you know how I love to use Norway as an example because it's a country that gets it right. They take care of their people. It's a market economy. It's not socialism. It's a market economy. And young students who go to college in Norway, guess what? They stay in Norway after they get out of college. They don't flee the country. Like, I got to get out of this country. I got to go to New York City. The great, the great beyond. No, they stay in Norway. They have great jobs. They have a higher standard of living. They have health care. They have no debt. They go to university. They don't have student loan debt. They have health care that's taken care of. So bottom line, Norway gets it right. They take care of their people. In fact, the fact that they do so the bottom line is Norway actually does it right. They take care of their people. And the fact that the Super Bowl actually spent time with an ad about Norway and America's coming for you. I mean, it should tell you, right? I mean, it's there in stark contrast, this idea that Norway is doing something right that the American people are not doing. I just thought it was an interesting aside. So that is on the $1.9 trillion stimulus piece. The other piece, of course, is the student loan forgiveness piece and taking care of the American people. Representative Ilhan Omar has been out in front on this, and we'll get to her in just a second. And she... it's interesting because she's saying that so many Minnesotans, where she's from, are absolutely drowning in debt, over $34,000 in student loan debt. That's an average of the student loan debt. So imagine a student coming out of college and trying to get a start in this world, and they're saddled with that enormous debt. How are they ever able to, quote unquote, achieve the American dream, buy a house, be able to provide for their family if for the first 10 years of their career, they're literally paying off that debt? That is the United States of America. How can we attempt to get ahead in the world if all of our future generation of students that are coming out of college are drowning in this debt? So here is Representative Ilhan Omar speaking about the necessity to wipe away this student loan debt and how important it is for future generations. Listen.
I always say America does not suffer from scarcity. We suffer from greed. We can choose to lift the burden of millions of people face. We can actually invest in the future of the American people. Today, we are taking a needed action to tackle the student loan debt crisis by using executive authority under the Higher Education Act to cancel up to $50,000 in student debt for federal loan borrowers. This is an important first step, but we can and must go bolder. We cannot be too bold in responding to the pandemic and providing needed help to the American people. I have been encouraged by the steps President Biden has taken to tackle the student debt crisis and hope he uses his executive authority to move towards full student debt cancellation.
Well, let's not get all sunshines and rainbows here on President Biden. Okay, on this show we're fair. And we tell the truth on this show. So what has he done on student loan debt? He's signaled that he's only willing to really kind of go up to 10,000. He hasn't really spoken out against student loan debt. I haven't heard him talking about this other than in passing this idea of passing $10,000 student loan debt forgiveness. So Chuck Schumer, of course, feeling the pressure from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on that side, and the progressives in the party pushing for that student loan forgiveness. But I haven't heard. I mean, have you? Grover, have you? I don't know. I haven't heard it. No, it's a head shake there. No. I haven't heard, again, I'm trying to be fair, but I haven't heard President Biden talking about, out in public talking about, we've got to get rid of student loan debt. So she's maybe being nice. She's trying to curry favor there. I get it. But if she wants to go bolder than what? Bolder than $50,000? If the president wants $10,000, you got to get him up to $50,000. And then you also need to make sure that we're also providing free public college. Now, I have heard the president talking about that. But we got to get on the same page here on this debt issue. And if through executive action, through the Higher Education Act, you can actually wipe away $50,000, the president of the United States, President Biden, do it. We need continued pressure from people like Ilhan Omar.
The American people are counting on us to meet this moment and implement meaningful change. I promise I will not stop fighting until we have ended the student loan debt crisis and cancel student debt for everyone in America. And I am so glad to be in this fight with my colleagues.
All right, so great for everyone in America. Now, this was on the federal side, of course. This is not public student debt or for private schools. So if you went to private school, they don't have any authority in that regard. Private loans, et cetera, that's a whole separate animal. This is for federal student loans, which was $1.7 trillion. So this could completely alter the landscape. Again, drop me a comment below. Let me know how this would affect you and your family, wiping away all of the student loan debt. I also want to talk today about these $2,000 checks. So again, we have the petition. I would love for you to all to go sign it. Go to morninginvest.com/sign. Right now, we're at 24,000 people who've signed this petition to provide $2,000 stimulus checks until the end of this pandemic. Incredibly important to have this happen. Incredibly important. And there's a growing chorus now from members of the Federal Reserve, members of Congress, to push towards $2,000 recurring stimulus. It's gaining traction. A lot of it moved over the weekend, by the way. But there's also this continuing fight over the current stimulus checks of $1,400. This weekend, we saw Representative Pramila Jayapal saying, we promised people that if we won the Senate in Georgia, we would send out $2,000 survival checks. They delivered to us victory, and now we must deliver. Targeting checks to a smaller group fails to do that. People need help like never before, and we must put money in their pockets. Yes. Why is there this sudden vacillation on stimulus checks? It's because of people like Senator Joe Manchin. It's the moderates in the party that do not, the big money donor party Democrats that do not want you to have stimulus checks. And again, this is why we need to get rid of Joe Manchin. Vote him out. He does not care about the American people. He does not care about the progressive core values that the people of his state care about. Tomorrow on the show, we're going to show you some more of what West Virginians are actually suffering from. But here's what Bernie Sanders had to say about this entire process. Listen, he said, unbelievable. There are some Democrats who want to lower the income eligibility for direct payments from $75,000 to $50,000 for individuals, and $150,000 down to $100,000 for couples. In other words, working class people who got checks from Trump would not get them from Biden. Brilliant. Yeah. So how did the Republicans manage to out-progressive the Democrats? Republicans managed to send larger checks under President Trump than Democrats are willing to do? And President Biden is willing to means test these checks going out? This is the ridiculous thing. I can't wrap my head around it. Neil Kashkari, who's the Federal Reserve chair from Minnesota, penned this opinion piece that I want to go through. It's a very important piece in the Wall Street Journal. He's the president and chief executive of the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. He wrote this piece. We need a long haul stimulus that will last as long as the pandemic does. 2 lessons, he says, from the Great Recession are relevant to today's economy. First, we must stop underestimating the current crisis. Second, assistance shouldn't be too targeted. So he's completely going against what Joe Manchin wants. Federal Reserve Chair, Chief Executive of the Federal Reserve. Normally in the pockets of Wall Street. Neil Kashkari has been calling for recurring stimulus. He's in fact been calling for $2,000 checks until the end of this pandemic. He says the assistance shouldn't be too targeted, meaning no means testing. Like, how poor are you? Oh, you're okay. Then we can actually, we can actually then give you a check if you only make $50,000, and we'll give you a check. Really? Yeah, because people that are making $75,000 aren't suffering as well. And what about all the people that are homeless and don't actually get checks in the first place? That they couldn't even find them. Why don't you marshal your efforts and instead of means testing people that are making $75,000? Why don't you put all of your efforts, Joe Manchin, into going after and finding those people who literally didn't even receive a check the first time because we couldn't find them because they were in homeless shelters or other places? Why don't we get money to those people? Put your efforts there. He says, the job market today is roughly as bad as the worst job market during the Great Recession. While the official unemployment rate fell to 6.7, many Americans have given up looking for work and are no longer counted as unemployed. The true unemployment rate, he says, is around 10%, same as it was in 2009. He says, as Congress and the Biden administration continue to look for additional fiscal support, it's important to link that support to actual recovery of the job market, rather than to a date when some expect the pandemic to be over. Yeah. So all of these people that are unemployed, that's what we need to be looking at, not some artificial date in the future where we think we're going to be back to full health and wellness. The goal of such fiscal support is not to provide traditional economic stimulus, as when officials use authority to do fiscal policy. He says, rather, the assistance is needed to help millions of American families avoid insolvency, losing their homes and businesses, being kicked out permanently. He's saying going big, we need to go big. That's our goal. We need to provide stimulus until the end of this. Until the majority of Americans are vaccinated and everyone who wants a vaccine can get one. We should be able to open the economy, return to normal. That's when our stimulus should stop. When we reach that point, not before. So Bernie's point about unbelievable. There are some Democrats who want to lower the income eligibility for direct payments. In other words, working class people who got checks from Trump would not get them from Biden. Brilliant, he says. This is the kind of garbage that I can't stand. That how Democrats win the election, they win the Senate, they win the White House, they win the House. Trump is gone. And now you're going to lower your threshold for stimulus payments, Joe Manchin, who's driving this? Unbelievable. But I am encouraged today because there is growing support for $2,000 stimulus checks. Now, Representative Ilhan Omar and others had put forth this plan to bring in $2,000 stimulus checks until we get out of this pandemic. She, of course, is calling for this. She has been out in front, tweeting about this, writing a letter to Washington, getting other members of Congress to sign on to her plan, and they have been. Other members of Congress are now signing on, and I couldn't be more, more excited about this because I think there's growing support now from Democrats to push on this issue. She chaired a panel recently, the congressional on the appeal show. Many other Democrats have now joined on with this. And I want to tell you about Tim Ryan, who came forward on this issue. Representative Tim Ryan is another who is supporting and pushing for $2,000 stimulus checks until the end of this pandemic. Bernie Sanders, of course. Remember, Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, co-authored a bill for $2,000 recurring stimulus until the end of this pandemic. We need $2,000 until this pandemic is over. And then we would shift into some sort of form of universal basic income. That's the goal. Here's Representative Tim Ryan, who supports the additional stimulus and multiple checks until the end of this pandemic. Let's take a listen.
talk to us about how would recurring payments affect people you have heard from who need help in this pandemic?
Well, this is an issue, quite frankly, and I think this is why this is such an important conversation. This has been an issue before the pandemic. I mean, we've seen income inequality continue to be exacerbated by globalization, by automation, by a huge tax cuts over the past 20 years that went primarily to the top 1%, huge reduction in the corporate tax. This has led to the level of income inequality that really has been unsustainable for so many families across the United States. And then you throw in now the pandemic, and I think the pandemic has pulled the veil back on all of these issues around inequality, whether it's access to healthcare, whether it's wages, whether it's the digital divide, when you see lack of vaccines getting into communities of color. All of these are huge issues that the pandemic has pulled the veil back. So now in the midst of the pandemic, this is really an issue. So these $2,000 payments, I think recurring payments, as many others do until we get out of this mess, are really, really important, because what's happening is you have people who do go on unemployment, and those people get the unemployment state and federal benefits, and that should be higher than $300 a week. It should be more like $5 or $6. But there are all these people that are still working. There's waitresses and waiters and in retail. They're working the same amount of hours, but they're making half of what they were making. And so they're falling behind. They're damaging their credit. For a working class person, it'll take, if you really screw your credit up, it'll take you 5-10 years to claw your way out of that mess. Not to mention you get back on your bills and the postal service isn't working, so everyone's getting more late fees. I mean, this is just compounding by the day. And I think the most direct way of putting money in people's pockets so that they can meet their obligations and then also put money into the economy is really critical right now to make sure that we have growth when we get out of this mess. So how are we going to have economic growth once the pandemic's gone, herd immunity, vaccines, and all the rest? We're not going to have the kind of growth that we need if working class people are filing bankruptcy or they're so far behind on their bills they can't put money into the economy. So this is important across the board for multiple reasons, both macro and microeconomics, and about the values. I mean, to me, this is a moral issue. Because of the way people are suffering every day. And I'm sure Congresswoman Omar's like me, we get texts from friends and constituents every single day. I'm not getting my unemployment check because the states have botched this, at least in Ohio, where people aren't getting their checks. So now you have the anxiety level, the stress level, the mental health issues that come from that. We got a lot of work to do, but I think one step in the right direction could be a big, bold move around $2,000 a month till we get out of this mess, and making sure people are economically stable, healthy, so that when the economy turns around and the vaccine starts kicking in, we can all move forward in a more positive way with more shared wealth, not just wealth getting concentrated at the top.
Hallelujah. Tim Ryan, way to go. Yes, that's exactly what we need. And what I loved about Tim Ryan's point is he painted the broad picture. It's not just one issue. It's people's credit being destroyed. It's people's businesses folding. It's people not even getting their unemployment checks because the state and local governments are screwed up. So they're not even getting their unemployment benefits. So they can't pay their bills, and their credit gets screwed up. Then they lose their homes. They can't put food on the table. Through no fault of their own, by the way. $2,000 stimulus checks now until the end of this pandemic. We've got to push our members of Congress. Again, we're sharing our petition with members of Congress, so please go and sign it. Go to morninginvest.com/sign. Put your name on this petition. Upwards of 24,000 of you have already signed, which is wonderful. So please do that. And I do want to mention our daily newsletter as well. Please join our newsletter. It's morninginvest.com. It's very important that you get on this newsletter because we've seen a number of big media companies like deplatforming people who share the truth about what's going on out there. So if you join our mailing list, God forbid something happens to us here on YouTube or other places, we will be able to email you immediately and let you know where you can find our show. So we're building backup plans and so forth right now. But please, it's very important. Not only will you get a daily newsletter for free, so you get that bonus, but also in case we ever have to connect with you to let you know what's going on with the show, that's a way to do it. So go to morninginvest.com and put your email address there. You'll get the welcome email, and then just hit me back. Let me know you got the welcome email, because I send you the email and just say, hey, Clayton, I got it. And then that way we know that you are all taken care of. So thanks for a little bit of a different show today. Of course, we are in the process of a big move. New studio, so we got the movers and boxes and everything's kind of crazy right now, so bear with us this week. It's a little bit crazy, but I wanted to bring you all of you this information today. Number one, on the stimulus front. Number two, on student loan forgiveness, and number three, of course, on these $2,000 stimulus checks. A lot of moving pieces this week, and of course, on top of all of that, the impeachment trial begins today. So we've got the impeachment trial starting today for President Trump, and we've got Congress 1 week before they go away for the President's Day break, trying to move forward on getting meaningful stimulus through Congress over the next few weeks. So all of that and more we'll be covering here on the show. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate you joining us today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Monday. Much love to all of you. We'll see you next time.